My fellow Americans,
what do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying... I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. keep the truth in and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Is the US a functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They have 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal healthcare. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this as a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after what you've already done.
If I was still in Parliament, I...
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You've indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science, and quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we tend to cover the stories the corporate media ignores. And tonight, we're going to talk about the preparation of the CBDCs, of course, the central bank digital currencies, and the rollout, which is imminent in a number of countries, but the United States in particular. Of course, President Biden, through executive order, pushing for total control of our money supply. Europe is already getting rid of cash and really pushing Europeans to stop using cash. The United States is following suit. And we're going to dive deep into exactly what this means for your wallet and the future of our money supply tonight.
Plus, the Justice Department is continuing to argue for censorship of speech on social media. This could go to the Supreme Court and be the largest challenge to free speech in our lifetimes. It's a huge case, and we're going to follow that.
Also, we're looking at New Mexico and the update there from the sheriff, and now a response from the governor. Hey, I don't need any lectures about constitutional law. I've got it. So the sheriff fighting back. What does this mean more broadly for your constitutional and civil liberties? We're going to look at all of that, plus American cities on the verge of collapse thanks to illegal immigration. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. welcome in on this Tuesday. So great to have all of you here. We want to tell you before we dive into the news tonight, our best way to stay connected with you right now, because all of these platforms, and as we head into this election year, you're going to see a lot more platforms banning certain channels and accounts and social media because the clampdown is coming. A friend of mine was saying, be warned, it is starting already. So our way to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. It's totally free. Plus, it brings you tons of value first thing in the morning. But we really would love for you to sign up, because if something happens to us here, the only way we'll be able to communicate with you is through our newsletter, to be able to say, hey, come on over here, we're live at this time, etc. So go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then you will receive a welcome email delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning. Is when you'll receive the newsletter about 7 a.m. Eastern time. It's a great newsletter. You can read it over your cup of coffee. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes for you to read the news of the day, catch up on some items you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to make you laugh a little bit. We hope we don't make you cry. But again, it's a great way for us to stay connected with you by going to redacted.inc, not .com, put in your email address, and then sign up. And then tomorrow morning, on Wednesday morning, you'll receive your very first newsletter. So thank you to all of our subscribers of the newsletter.
That's right. And today is the 12th of September. I would like to wish our youngest child, Eve, a happy 7th birthday. Our baby now is 7.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it's a big day in our family.
I pulled a tooth out of her. It was like dangling. It had been there wobbling for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you want Daddy to pull it out? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, it won't hurt. It won't hurt. And then she's like, okay, let me prepare. And then she grabbed like a towel. And like, she's like, let me just hold on to this towel. And I went in and I just barely did, and it popped right out. And she's like, wow, that was easy.
She's still got one more, just one dangler. I'm like, just let him go. We have to just be done with these front teeth.
It's like flopping sideways now.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Anyway, our littlest, my little baby, she's 7. That's a big deal. So I hope it's a great day for her.
Yeah, happy birthday to our Eve.
To our little Eve.
All right, well, get ready. CBDCs are coming to take your privacy away. Get ready for the central bank digital currency and to help basically lose your privacy. Your ability to pay for things in cash, severely limited or totally eliminated, actually, is quietly coming to the West. But other countries are saying, no thanks, this is a bridge too far. We will get there in a moment. But first, a troubling trend right now of banks across the United States randomly deciding to shut down bank accounts with no reason given whatsoever. Imagine now you have no choice, right? Because now I don't have a bank account. I can't use a bank, so I'm being forced to use a central bank digital currency because I have no bank. So what's going on here? 3 separate coin shop owners over the past few days that sell gold, silver coins suddenly found their bank accounts just totally shut down. The coin shop owner, who operates a coin shop dealing in silver and gold, received certified letters from the bank saying, hey, we're going to start the shutting down process. Watch.
I'll read some of the letter to you guys. And I've heard of this happening before. I just didn't believe that it would happen to me. So, dear customer, we're writing about your account. After a recent review, we have decided to end our relationship with you and close your accounts referenced above. As stated in your account agreement, we can close your account at any time for any reason with or without notice. We will begin our closing process on September 6, 2023. So they gave me basically a month. And in the letter, it says they're going to close even my credit cards I have with them. Isn't that nice of them?
That's very nice of them. You even close your credit cards. What's shocking is that the bank declined to provide any reason at all for their abrupt decision. We've heard a number of stories of people being debanked over the past few weeks here at the end of the summer. Our friends over at the Gray Zone suddenly found out that their GoFundMe pages were shut down.
We saw that during the pandemic. Parents groups who lost their PayPal accounts for advocating for school reopening.
Trucker convoy in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is not new, but now these letters are coming, and without any prior notice, affecting multiple accounts, including those belonging to his children and wife, also shut down, like shutting down your children's accounts too? For what reason? And there's no recourse. What can you do? What can you do? So federal governments are terrified of cryptocurrencies, and they don't want you stocking up on gold and silver. They absolutely don't want that. They want you to use their their currency, which they can print and create out of thin air, that they have total control over. It's why these companies are being sued out of existence. A lot of these crypto companies are being sued out of existence because they don't want it to be legal. They want crypto to be illegal. And they don't want companies to operate in this way. The governments want control. So now central bank digital currencies are coming, whether these countries are ready or not, according to the Wall Street Journal. And the CBDC is putting the government at the center of every single transaction. It gives the governments visibility into financial transactions, the ability to revoke money at any time. They don't like what you're spending it on. Tracking, of course, of gun sales, etc. It doesn't matter. They will revoke it. They will revoke your ability to buy these things. They've already been laying the groundwork for this during COVID, taking away cash. They don't want you to use cash. They told us stay away from cash, of course, because COVID could live on the surfaces of that. And we're hearing it again now as we enter this new phase of COVID this fall. Watch.
Well, health experts say the coronavirus can live on surfaces like cash for up to 10 days. That has many people worried about shopping and other everyday tasks.
Yeah, a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of these people that news station interviewed are really concerned about cash. Mm-hmm. Like they're really.
They don't want it.
We have a team of reporters tonight covering cash and how it's killing you. What's happening now, of course, dozens of countries have now moved out of the pilot program phase for the CBDCs. They're now getting close to launching their central bank digital currencies.
Can I just say that reminds me of we're not children where your mom says don't put pennies in your mouth. I'm over that. I know better.
Yeah.
Right? I know money's dirty. I know to wash my hands.
If I'm ever, when I'm sitting there like Scrooge McDuck and I'm fondling through all of my gold coins.
Do that?
When I take my bath every morning and I swim through my gold coins, I get out and then I take a shower.
Okay, good for you.
When I play with my giant piles of cash and I'm rolling around in my coronavirus cash.
You don't eat right after.
I don't eat. I wash my hands after playing with my coronavirus cash.
It doesn't go like cash burrito. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm an adult. I can handle it. So now these dozens of countries are now moved out of this pilot program phase, and they're getting closer to launching their CBDCs. Here is the CBDC tracking map to show you where things stand right now. So see if you can spot your country of choice here on this map. Let's just kind of go through what we're seeing here. Now, in pink is the 11 have launched, 21 pilot programs, 33 developed in the development stage right now. The United States in the development stage, Canada, Mexico in the development stage, all of North America in the development stage, Brazil in the development stage, and you can see again a lot of these turquoise, Colombia in the development stage, and then you have some of these in purple, which are in the launched phase. And you already have some that have said, we're done with these things. Like we're sort of inactive on these because we just don't think that it's working. And now you have some who are saying, we're done. Senegal is saying we're done with this. Nigeria also reporting that we're done with this. And you see some pilot programs, Russia, Kazakhstan, Australia. But yeah, you're starting to get some blowback now from some of these countries that are saying we're not going to use this anymore. We've given it a chance and we think that it's a terrible idea. So, for instance, 5 more countries have now abandoned CBDCs. So just kind of going through some of these countries here, Denmark, Japan, Ecuador, Japan specifically saying we tried it in 2020. We're not doing it anymore. Finland as well. And you have these countries that are saying we're not going to do it. We've given it a chance. Ecuador, Denmark, Finland, and Senegal as well, saying we're done with this. Nigeria is perhaps the biggest and most recent disaster case for CBDCs.
Even the countries that say that they're still in pilot program, Carol Roth in her book points out that China boasted really high adoption of CBDC accounts, but the average deposit was like $1 or between $1 and $3. So people had them and they were like, I don't think I really want to use it. I'll just put $1 in, have it, see what comes of it. They're in a holding pattern. That doesn't mean that it's taking off by any measure.
No, and China, by the way, has also built their CBDCs with the use of banks as well. So it's in fact different than the way that the United States wants to do it, which is a federal program. Of course, now we know the largest banks in the United States have come out of this FedNow pilot program and are fully up and running on this for transactions. So this is happening. So the back end FedNow program, which will settle transactions using the Fed, using this sort of digital FedNow currency behind Citibank, Bank of America, all those pilot programs that were rolled out. It's coming. It's absolutely covering. So CBDC would replace the current Treasury control of the currency and replace it with a Fed control of the currency. And this would change the dollar forever. Absolutely change the dollar forever. And the Fed is not elected. It can do basically whatever it wants. It barely answers to Congress. I mean, it's a joke to think that it even really answers to Congress. They like to pretend that they do, but they are omnipotent. They don't answer to Congress. They don't answer to you as a voter. They don't answer to anybody. And they will completely control the money supply. And the currency would be fully digitally controlled by them. Governor DeSantis in Florida is the only candidate saying no to CBDCs. No other presidential candidate, by the way, is saying no to this. He's introduced legislation that would make it illegal in Florida for CBDCs, calling it the Big Brother's digital dollar, and saying Florida would prohibit the use of federally sanctioned CBDC as money within Florida's Uniform Commercial Code. Ban CBDCs issued by foreign government reserves and central banks, including China's digital yuan. So he would ban the federal digital currency in Florida. And here's what he has to say about it. Listen.
A centralized digital currency is directly controlled and issued by the government to consumers, and it provides the government with a direct view of all consumer activities. And so this is something that is being proposed as somehow being environmentally sustainable, a way to increase access to consumers who lack the means to join a traditional bank. But as we've come to learn, any way they can get into society to exercise their agenda, they will do it. So what the central bank digital currency is all about is surveilling Americans and controlling behavior of Americans. And how.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So guys, it's coming. This is exactly what's about to happen to your currency, your digital dollar. Get ready for full control of this. And of course, the way that you can fight back on this is what Catherine Austin Fitts talks about, is to absolutely flood your local representatives with letters and phone calls and demonstrations and protests. And coming up a little bit later in the show, we're going to show you exactly how this is working in the state of New Mexico right now. When people take to the streets and say enough is enough, we do not want this control. We do not want you to control our currency. We want to be able to use cash. We want to be able to pay the babysitter with cash. We want to be able to give a tip to somebody in cash. We don't want to be using all of this digital currency that is totally controlled. Every transaction is controlled by you. If I want to pay someone in cash, I can do that. If I want to run my business with cash, should be my constitutional right to use cash, to use this currency. But under this new plan, that is going to go away. So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below and where we are with digital currency. Will you guys support a central bank digital currency? Are you excited about a digital currency? Let us know in the comments below.
All right. Well, we have a lot more to get to. We're going to talk about control and how the government wants to continue to do it on social media. We're going to give you an update on the ban on guns in New Mexico. Also tell you about American cities collapsing. But before we do that, we want to tell you about our friends over at Bank on Yourself. Because did you know that the average 401k or IRA withdrawal at full retirement is about $90,000? How the heck are you going to live your entire retirement on $90,000? You can't even do that in a campground. So that's a lie. When Wall Street tells you to max out your IRA or 401k and you'll be all set, you will not. You have to have another plan besides that. That's why Bank on Yourself is a better way to grow and protect your hard-earned money. This is a retirement plan alternative that has never had a losing year in over 160 years. This is tax-free retirement income, and you know what your tax rate will be when you retire, 0. So you should check out this as a retirement savings plan. This is the secret that Wall Street doesn't want you to know. So do you want guaranteed, predictable annual growth, control of your money, and tax-free retirement? Then go to bankonyourself.com/redacted and you'll get a free report with the proven retirement plan alternative that banks and Wall Street is hoping you don't know about. So again, go to bankonyourself.com/redacted for your free report. That's bankonyourself.com/redacted.
Well, if you do subscribe to the show, your name will pop up here on the big screen. I've seen a couple of you guys subscribing here during the show. If you do subscribe, it should pop up here on the big screen on Rumble and on YouTube. So thank you to all of you for your kind support, for supporting our show and subscribing. We're nearing 500,000 subscribers now on Rumble, which is amazing to me, and nearing 2.1 million subscribers on YouTube. So thank you to everyone who supports us and supports our analyzation here and looking at these big media companies who are trying to clamp down on censorship.
That's right. Okay, censorship. Speaking of, in 9 days, free speech could change forever because we could have on our hands a Supreme Court case that challenges our ability to speak freely on social media. This is an update to the case where the Biden administration has been begging the courts to please let us keep censoring social media. We did it so well during the pandemic. We love it. We're drunk on that power. We need to keep going. Now, again, this is an update to the case brought by Missouri and Louisiana attorneys general. And in July, Judge Terry Doughty ruled that the Biden administration had violated all of our First Amendment rights by working directly with social media to censor speech about COVID and other topics. He ruled the government cannot do that anymore. So the Biden administration appealed, saying, please repeal this ruling. We need to keep doing that. We want to censor American speech. And we got a ruling just last Friday. The court gave them 10 days before the ruling goes into effect to see if they want to appeal it to the Supreme Court. My guess is that they do. They want to do this. But the ruling did mostly uphold the edict that the government should not be working with social media to censor speech. But it's very specific. I want to take you through it because I want you to see what our own government is arguing it should be able to do to us. It's amazing. I mean, this is the year 2023, and the federal government is trying to argue in the courts for the power to censor speech. This is our most basic freedom, and we need to see what they're doing. So here is the ruling, the court ruling on what the government is doing. This is sort of their summary, that the plaintiffs argued that the government had been doing this big, bad First Amendment abuse. They said, we agree. The government should not be doing this. They showed examples such as this. Here is one social media being reached out by the government saying, hey, I don't think we're saying you should remove vaccine hesitancy, but it's reasonable to slow it down. Why is that?
What's the difference? Slow it down.
Yeah. Here's a government official explaining that, hey, other social media companies seem to be able to get this right. What's wrong with you? They're sort of playing the bad dad here. Like, other companies are doing exactly what we say. Why can't you? They also point out, now this is all from the opinion, from the final ruling of these judges. So every time we get a ruling, we see all these examples of how bad the government's been. Here's another one. The government succeeded in having a video removed from the Louisiana Department of Justice. The Department of Justice had just put up a video about people protesting COVID mandates, and the federal government removed it. The government argued that, that's because states don't have First Amendment rights. Here's their argument based on that. The courts did not agree. The government had also argued, hey, you know what? No harm, no foul, because Twitter doesn't censor COVID information anymore, so that harm doesn't apply. The court didn't go for that either. The court rightly pointed out that just because they're not doing it anymore doesn't mean they won't do it in the future over future topics, and probably they still are. Now, this I think is so interesting. They heard testimony from Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and other individuals saying they had been kicked off Twitter, and then when they got back on Twitter, they had been sort of trying to behave, walking on eggshells so that they don't get kicked off again. That very behavior of self-censorship, the court ruled, is injury in fact. So If you are kind of dancing around like we do every stinking day here on this show, because we know that censorship complex is big, that is sort of you having your First Amendment rights violated by this very fact. The fact that you continue to censor yourself because you know the rules, because you know the censorship complex is in place. That's me right now.
So that's
Like,
literally an injury. I mean, we do that every day on this show.
Yes.
We do that every day on this show because we're like, okay, are we allowed to say that? I mean, thank God we're on Rumble as well because there's, it's free speech.
Right.
But we think about, oh my God, if we put this in the title, if we put this in the description, if we say this particular thing, or Philip and I go back and forth on like, can we show this particular footage?
Yeah.
Can we show this rubble? Can we show what actually happened after this terrorist attack? We get age restricted, limited, demonetized. Every day it's a struggle.
Yeah.
That is so under this, that's sufficient injury.
This is injury in fact that our First Amendment rights are being trumped on because we know that there is a censorship complex in place. And so we are dancing around free speech all the time. Like we are the best dancers on the planet when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Now here's the government arguing, this is not, I'm telling you that the government argued that the first ruling on this case was too broad and they wanted to redefine some of this prohibition, what they're not allowed to do. Here is what they still can do. They still can sort of follow up with social media. They can request content reports. They can be, say to be on the lookout. What they can't do is specifically say, don't do these things or remove this speech or slow down this speech or we don't like this speech. This applies to the White House, the Surgeon General, the CDC, and the FBI. Those were the worst offenders. The NIAIH, Fauci's organization, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, they said those should not be in this group. Here's them sort of removing them, saying, we don't have enough to pin on these guys, and so they sort of should be disgrouped from this. But other agencies, yes, they coerced, encouraged, and violated First Amendment rights. The FBI, yes, absolutely they did. This is saying we find that they did that. In fact, they did that very successfully. Take a look at this. They did it with a success rate of at least 50% of the time. When they wanted something taken down, it happened. The CDC, yes, absolutely. They coerced and encouraged and violated. That's the ruling on that. Same for the White House. Now, here is the final say that they cannot do. They no longer can, they sort of redefined, they shall take no action, formal or informal, to coerce or encourage censorship of speech. So this is as it stands now, 10 days until that ruling. What do you think? Will the courts take it up or not? Now, whether or not they take it to the Supreme Court, that's no guarantee the court will pick it up. I'm inclined to think they will. They want this so badly they can taste it. They had a taste of this power and they do not want to give it up. So let me know what you think. This was applied not just to COVID. It was applied to topics such as Russian disinformation, Hunter Biden, elections, current questions about gender ideology. All of these things, they want it. So let us know what you think.
Power. Yeah, let us know in the comments below what you think about this. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Tuesday. We're going to talk about this New Mexico gun ban and the battle back from the sheriff's office and sheriff's department there on that particular issue, saying, no, we're not enforcing that law. We'll tell you the blowback from the governor's office, as well as American cities collapsing, Democrat cities specifically, who had opened up their cities and said, hey, we're a sanctuary city. Come on, all the illegal immigrants. Come on. Well, now, really a devastating crisis is unfolding. And many of these Democratic leaders are saying we can't handle it and we are facing a crisis. Imagine that. Didn't we warn you about all of this? We'll get to that in a second. But first, I should mention, we do this show at nighttime. And when we're done, it's like 10:30 at night. We try to, go to bed on time and get a good night's sleep. But sometimes it's like tossing and turning, staying awake at night. It can be difficult. And especially when you're thinking about, oh my God, I got to get up early tomorrow. I've got, make breakfast for the kids. I've got to get them out the door on time. That's why we want to tell you about our friends over at BioOptimizers, because they, ever since we've started adding Magnesium Breakthrough, which is their fantastic supplement to our nightly routine, we've been able to quiet our mind and get the best sleep ever. Once I started taking Magnesium Breakthrough, our sleep completely changed. Natalie now makes it a part. As soon as we're done with the show, magnesium gets you asleep nice and easy, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it helps you sleep better. It also can help you calm your mind. And what's amazing is, unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind, help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. And so don't miss out on the most relaxing sleep ever with Magnesium Breakthrough. For exclusive offer for our listeners, go to our website right there on the screen. It's magbreakthrough.com/redacted. magbreakthrough.com/redacted. And there's a code, which is redacted, which will help you save 10%. So you want to use that 10% off during the checkout phase. Use the code redacted to save 10%. Once again, the URL is breakthrough.com/redacted, and then use that coupon code redacted when you're checking out to save 10% so you can get your sleep back. You can get your sleep on and feel better about yourself. So thanks to everyone who subscribed to the channel. I should mention, if you're watching us right now live, please smash that like button. What it does is it pushes us further out into the YouTube algorithm and really helps during the live broadcast so that YouTube sees, wow, more and more people are clicking this and liking it. And so then YouTube actually promotes it, which they don't normally do when we just release a normal video. So again, thank you guys. When you hit that like button, it really helps.
And thank you, Leffingwell, for subscribing to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leffingwell. Well, this is unconstitutional and I won't enforce it. Those are the words of New Mexico's sheriff, who is now taking a stand and against this crazy law, this crazy ban by the governor of New Mexico, of course, who just over the weekend put in place this new ban on open carry weapons, saying we've had and she did it under the Health Act, basically, under the health, as a violation of the health code, basically saying that we have a health crisis in New Mexico as it relates to all of these mass shootings and shootings in general. So what we're going to do is anyone who has open carry will face a fine or imprisonment if they're seen on the streets carrying weapons. So now the sheriff has come out in Bernalillo County and said, I am not going to enforce it. And frankly, it's unconstitutional. Watch.
The governor, to her credit, just gave us a head up minutes before the press conference. We expressed to her that we do not agree with it. That's why she did mention in the press conference that she knows we weren't on board, nor did we draft it. Is there a realistic way to enforce this order? No, there is not, because we'll cut that conversation off because it's unconstitutional.
Oh, it's unconstitutional.
Okay. Not going to do that.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big moment to say, we think this is unconstitutional. We're not going to support it. But also what I found he said interesting is that she basically gave us a little heads up ahead of time. Now, if you understand their relationship and you understand that they've had discussions, the sheriff and the governor's office, about task forces. How can we keep criminals behind bars so that while they're awaiting their hearings, they're not out on some ridiculously low bail, that they're able to go out and commit another crime? What can we do as a task force? And so they've been having these meetings, this criminal task force, we're trying to work on this. And he was blindsided by this. He basically admits that we didn't know anything about this, and you just gave us a little bit of a heads up before your press conference to announce a ban on open carry weapons.
But think of what a power crisis this is you have a governor pushing down an edict with no way to enforce it. That's lawlessness, right? So you just have someone exerting their power in a way that is toothless.
Well, and we saw at the protests yesterday, right? And there's more protests overnight. All these people were showing up with their concealed carries. And according to local news reports, they reached out to the sheriff's office. No one was cited. No one was given a fine. No one. They didn't issue one fine to all of these people showing up with their weapons right on their backs, right on their pockets, right on their hip. No one. No one was issued a fine. But that's the law. The law is now from the governor's office, because there's a health crisis, that they have to be issued a $5,000 fine and or arrested if they don't put it away or get rid of it.
Right. I mean, I would find that really terrifying to think that, okay, I can say laws and they don't go into effect. So what is my power here? And did I just abuse my power and show my cards?
Yeah.
Right?
So he says, he was asked also about the criminal angle of all of this, because the governor's argument is that this is going to stop criminals. And so here's what he says, that about the criminals, that this won't stop them at all. stop criminals at all because of this ban. Listen.
I do not want to have political violence towards my deputies or here in Bernalillo County. Criminals do not follow the law or a public health order. Never seen it. We will never see criminals follow the law.
Yeah. And this is the argument we were making last night on the show, right? Which is, so, okay, great that they have this ban in place. This is going to stop criminals who are now going to pay attention to what law enforcement tells them to do? No. It doesn't matter if they get legal or illegal guns. They're going to carry out their crimes no matter what. It doesn't really matter. The governor has now responded and fired back at the sheriff, saying, I don't need a lecture on constitutionality from Sheriff Allen. What I need is action. What we need is for leaders to stand up for the victims of violent crime. We need law enforcement, district attorneys, public officials, school leaders, state agencies to use every single tool at their disposal to stop this violence, period. Okay. Again, how is what you just did going to stop violence, period? In fact, it could be argued now that people won't have the right or ability to defend themselves against these criminals because of your policies, which have helped defund the police, kept lower patrols, looked the other way during violent crimes, let people shoplift. So now these people who are law-abiding citizens will now not have the ability to defend themselves should one of these criminals who you haven't arrested, haven't done anything to, now can hurt somebody, and they have no recourse to defend themselves. Reporter Laura Logan, friend of the show, she tweeted this, and I thought it was really good. She said, "Is New Mexico a test run for a nationwide health emergency where gun rights are suspended for all in the name of public health? This is what happens when the federal government does something insane like declaring gun violence an epidemic, which is ridiculous, and making it a health emergency. And no one says or does a thing. This is where it leads, and make no mistake, they are not done. They are probing to see who rises and how people respond. Classic Marxist tactics. Move the line, encounter resistance, hold and map it out so you can isolate and destroy while waiting for resistance to fade. Then move the line again. Hold when you encounter resistance, wait for it to pass, then push forward again. Always hold and forward, never back. Allow this in New Mexico, and you are one step closer to losing it all." I'm going to save this tweet. I think we should all save this tweet because to me, this is the most poignant description I've seen of how these authoritarian leaders grab hold of like incremental power.
Yes.
And I think it's right. You hold the line, you map it out, you see where there's resistance, like in the case of the January 6th, right? January 6th, you sort of map out the resistance, and then you demonize those people, and you take away their civil liberties. You throw them behind bars without trial for many, many months. You throw them in solitary confinement, which is what they did. You ban their social media accounts. You target them to suppress their speech. She's absolutely right about this. It's terrifying. I think some Democrats are becoming aware of this because a bunch of Democrats just signed a letter saying they don't agree with it either. 5 Democrats in New Mexico have now signed on to this. So these 5 Democrats, to their credit, actually, it looks like 6 of them. 6, I thought it was 5, but it looks like 6 of them have signed a letter saying that they do not support this either. That they see, oh yes, we see a lot of violent crime, but basically we're not going to give up our constitutional rights for this. Like, yes, this is a violation of the U.S. Constitution. And so you can't just do this by fiat. So yes, we support ending violent crime, but we do not support you taking away a person's constitutional right to open carry and bear arms. So these 5 Democrats, if you know them, are the 6 Democrats.
I'm counting 5, but I'm wearing my reading glasses, and that's
it is 5. Yeah, I was looking at like the signature line thinking it was 6. But okay, it is 5 Democrats. So I think that's interesting. So good for those individuals who put their name on paper to say they do not support this. Good. That's good. But interestingly, I thought this was interesting. DC Drano pointed this out. He noticed a couple of Democrats tweeting almost the exact same thing. Now, these are U.S. congressman, or at least Ted Lieu is. And you have David Hogue, who is a Democratic political activist. But they basically tweeted the exact same thing, the exact same language. So I'm going to read this. I support gun safety laws. However, this order from the governor of New Mexico violates the U.S. Constitution. No state in the union can suspend the federal Constitution. There's no such thing as a state public health emergency exception to the U.S. Constitution. To which David Hogue also tweets almost the exact same thing. I support gun safety, but there's no such thing as a state public health emergency exception to the Constitution. It's like cut and pasted. And Democrats, like, who's giving them their talking points? Where did they get this information? Are they full? Are like somebody is giving them their talking points? There's some sort of central Democratic something. I'm not an idiot. There's somewhere somebody is telling them, hey, say this, because we are losing Democratic voters right now. We're going to lose this election. We all need to be on the same page. We need to support the Constitution, but come down against this particularly. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Again, but New Mexico, I think, it's a microcosm of a larger problem. So that's why I want to really focus and cover on this story, because I think it's a vital story for us.
Yeah, and so far the civil disobedience has been nonviolent, which also proves the point. And so it's interesting to watch how there is power in American opinion and American action. So take action wherever you think appropriate.
Well, and DC Drano tweeted out a good point. In Richmond, they did the Second Amendment rally where you had 20,000 or so people came out and fully engaged, nonviolent protests, saying down with the tyranny, and they got their way. And there's calls now to have another full Second Amendment rally in New Mexico, coming out in a big, big way, saying absolutely not. You're not going to take away our Second Amendment rights, and you're not going to violate the U.S. Constitution in order to take away our civil liberties. And I think to Laura Logan's point, like this, it's scary because they're going to be watching this. Like, so the people that do fully come out, those are the people that they're going to be watching, right? Keeping an eye closely on them. But this is how we can say to fight back against this tyranny. So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below.
All right, we have more news to get to. We want to tell you about this collapse of American cities and what one Republican presidential candidate says to do. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Lear Capital, because as you know, from time to time, we have Kevin Demerit from Lear Capital on the show to talk about the writing on the wall about the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy. Recently, he has spoken about why so many countries, including the BRICS nations, plan to move away from the U.S. dollar and create a gold-backed currency, and what that can mean for the value of your savings. That's why we want to recommend that you call Lear Capital or go to LearRedacted.com and get your free copy of The Tipping Point. This is a report that helps explain how to protect your savings and retirement with gold and silver, because it's only a matter of time until we're forced to use digital currencies. We just spoke about that at the top of the show. So you need to get educated quickly to preserve the wealth that you already have. Now, of course, we have been moving away from the U.S. dollar, Clayton and I, into hard assets like gold, silver, and real estate, because the writing's on the wall, right? So get your free report, The Tipping Point. It's free, and it's about the U.S. dollar, the economy, and what it could mean for your savings and retirement. Again, go to LearRedacted.com or go to 800-613-3557. This is an eye-opening report, and we want to thank them for making that available for our audience. Once again, it's 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com right now. Well, American cities are collapsing and Democrats are freaking out. And guess who will pay for this? You, the American taxpayer. So here's one solution that Republican candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has is, hey, let's deport entire families and then just get rid of the whole concept of anchor babies. What do you think of this? Watch.
The family unit will be deported. As a family unit, we'll never separate families, but we will debureaucratize the process for which law-abiding citizens and their families have a path to legal immigration into the country if they meet the criteria.
The child who's born in the United States, who's a birthright citizen of the United States, would also be deported in that,
yes,
in that case?
That's correct. And I think that there are legally contested questions, and I'm honest about this. They're contested, but there are legally contested questions under the 14th Amendment of whether the child of an illegal immigrant is indeed a child who enjoys birthright citizenship or not. We will follow the Constitution and the law, letter of the law to a T, but The point I was making with respect to the families, we will never use separation of families as a deterrent. I think that's a mistake. I'm a pro-family person. But we have to stand and abide by the rule of law where the family is returned to the country of origin. And then under the right circumstances, certain families will be given a path back through legal immigration.
All right. Now, this brings up the issue of anchor babies, which is interesting because he is one. We should be clear about that. He is the parents of Indian immigrants. His father had come on a work visa and then went back to meet his mom in an arranged marriage. He tells this story in his book. And then they migrated and had him here. But his father had a work visa. They were legal immigrants. So this is where he's making the distinction. You don't have to like the distinction. I get that there's a class element here, right? Let's not pretend there's not. Immigration is good for a nation when it means importing productive people in a controlled manner. That's not what we have right now. Let's all agree. Even the rich women of ABC's The View declared, this is really hard on us. It's hard in cities where we're used to like being able to move freely around in our Lululemons and get manicures. There's too many people here crowding our rich schools. Watch.
But frankly, I think we need to find, and we've dealt with this before. I lived in Miami. I was an immigrant in Miami in the 80s. You'll remember when we had the Mariel boat lift. Yes. 125,000 Cubans came in a matter of 6 months. It puts tremendous stress on a city, on a community, on the social services. They need to be resettled elsewhere.
They need to be out. We're this massive country.
Well,
and it's only going to get worse with global warming and climate change because people can't live in certain parts of this world.
Okay, so what they're saying is shoo out of here, right? Shoo along. Yes, we want immigrants. Good. I was one, right?
It always sounds good in principle, right? On their mountaintop, their sanctimonious mountaintop, right? Now it's affecting their lives in New York City. And now it's a problem. Now we need to comment about this. Now we need to get them out of here.
Now, to this point, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is saying that the city is facing a financial tsunami, and he has taken truth serum. And he is telling the nation, we can't handle this, and everything's on the table, and budget cuts are going to get serious, folks. Watch his interview over the weekend.
The $12 billion price tag has been thrown around over the next couple of years, and you're talking about every single department being cut. That is a broad statement. Can you zero in on maybe something a little more direct, that a service that may be cut, and how soon people might see it?
Well, we're going to give a financial overview. I sat down, I was briefed by Jacques Jihad, my budget director, and we're going to reveal to the entire city, each agency, what we're asking. Every agency is going to have to do a 5% PEG program to eliminate the gap, finding efficiencies. We did 2 rounds of that already, and we're going to show New Yorkers exactly what we're faced with, because transparency is crucial here. I have to be honest to New Yorkers. What we are up against.
Are you talking about emergency personnel as well?
Everything is on the table now. Think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
We're talking $12 billion. $12 billion of running our city. Sanitation, police, education, libraries, everything that we have to run the city. There's a minimum amount of money that comes in that we have to address this crisis. That's a national crisis, and we've been ignored.
What's a timeline then for cuts?
This is going to be in the next round of budget. We have to do a budget modification in November, where we have to account for the money that is going to be needed, and we have to do it 2 years out. We have to announce our budgets every 2 years out.
Okay, so what he's saying is we can't afford to live the life that we lead. It's not like New York City is so safe as it is, and it will become less so because they can't pay enough people to take care of the population that we have. Now, this is what we actually want to hear from politicians, right? We were wrong. We are collapsing. We have a problem and we don't see the solution, and we all need to be aware of this. This is showing a great divide in the Democratic Party. Just on Monday, watch this frosty body language between Mayor Adams and Vice President Kamala Harris at a 9/11 memorial ceremony. I'm going to talk over it, but watch just how they do not want to look at each other. This is, again, cold shoulder of the nth degree. They're not interacting, no eye contact, nothing. The New York Post is calling this a split between City Hall and the White House over the migrant crisis. Maybe, or maybe they have a personal vendetta. Maybe they just don't like each other. How are we supposed to know? And he later on said, yes, I absolutely want to talk to the White House because so much is happening on the migrant crisis and they're pretending it's not. It's not just crushing social services like schools and hospitals and transport and housing. It is also causing tension and violence. Look at this. Last week, 6 people were arrested from a Brooklyn migrant shelter for assaulting officers in an altercation with scooters. Again, watch this. I'm going to talk over it. You don't need to hear it clearly. Now, the president has been utterly unwilling to address the influx of problems and will continue to do so as long as he's president. And I don't think there's much chance of the administration giving up this anchor babies, because anchor babies are American taxpayers. We've talked about this before. This is an entire generation of accidental Americans. In fact, one which was Boris Johnson. We've talked about how Boris Johnson is the cautionary tale of accidental Americans because he sold a condo, didn't realize that he owed his capital gains to the American government, and then was owed a big fat tax bill. What he did as a result of that was renounce his citizenship, not until he already had lost that tax challenge. So American tax system is draconian. I think most people don't understand it. But now you might say, okay, but illegal immigrants don't pay taxes. Well, when they take a paycheck, they do. When they actually, now the U.S. government is even suing Tesla because it won't hire illegal migrants because they will take a paycheck and the government will take their taxes out of that paycheck. Whether or not the migrant later files taxes, it doesn't matter, right? Because they dip their hands into paychecks. You know this. Anybody who's ever collected a paycheck knows this. Now, this week, the IRS says that they're going after the wealthiest individuals. But as Carol Roth points out in her book, that math doesn't add up. They just say that to make you feel better, but really it's the working class that they're after. She says that if you actually took the top 11 wealthiest individuals in the U.S., these people here, and collected all of their assets, that would fund the government for 2.5 months. That's not going to get us anywhere. So we're going after the rich to fund ourselves. The math just doesn't work out on that. They need to breed working class. That's how because the government doesn't have an input problem, they have a spending problem. How are they going to do that? They need worker bees. So there's no way the U.S. government is giving up their anchor babies, people they can tax abroad and overseas, people they can tax in paychecks right now. Did you know that the average person works from January to May for the U.S. government? They only really keep what they make from June on. Of course, they're going to continue to do this. So nice idea, Vivek Ramaswamy. I don't think that's going to be really the thing. But what do you think? What is the thing? I mean, I am a bit like Eric Adams at this point. Like, I don't know. It's a humongous problem. What can be done? The Biden administration says, what problem?
What problem?
We're fine.
He's fine. Yeah. He has no concerns at all about the border and what's happening in the American cities. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to have an interview with Michael Yon, who's back in Panama at the Darien Gap. And where, I mean, it is disaster. It's DEFCON 1 right now with the staging area for illegal immigration pouring into the United States across the borders while the Biden administration is totally asleep on that. So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. And we also want to tell you about our community. If you'd like to support independent journalism, you can do that just by going to redacted.inc. You can become a member today and support what we do here for the price of a cup of coffee once a day. Click on that Rebellion button there and join the Redacted Rebel Rebellion. And as a Rebel VIP, you get access to exclusive content, early access to videos, documentaries, like we just launched our 9/11 documentary there as well to our Redacted audience before anyone else gets to see it, and our new book club that we're launching, and some of our live streams, and again, exclusive videos. So again, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism by going to redacted.inc. So,
well, we're going to cut out just a slight bit earlier tonight than we normally do because, again, we told you it's our baby girl's birthday. So thank you again for supporting the show. Thank you for joining us. We will see you here tomorrow, same time, same place. I hope you have a wonderful night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.